Right. It was my first experience setting up the whole Zoom live stream stuff, so I'm really hoping it goes smoothly. Yeah, here we go.
Hello, YouTube people and Facebook people.
Oh, wait. It says with live on the Zoom, we're not quite there. Now.
It says it's live on YouTube on my end.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello, YouTube people and Facebook people and everyone else.
Are we good to go?
I think so. Kind of like one watching now. Sorry, I'm trying to. Apologies.
It's okay. We're on Derby time. It's usually 20 minutes later.
Sorry. Listed. Oh, this one is 11. Oh, sorry. It's just it started in a different live thing for some reason. Okay. If I copy the link. 2 seconds. I'll fix this.
I feel I should sing a song while we're waiting for him to come back. Do 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 do, like we're on hold.
Yeah, has it been decided what the order of people going first is presenting?
Well, I was just going to go off the screen in. So Naomi's up first, then Elena, is it? Is that how I pronounce it?
Eliana, but
Eliana. Beautiful name. And then Ian, and then Jade, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. Are we missing anyone?
Kevin.
Gloria. There you are, Gloria. Sorry. You're actually first, Gloria.
No pressure.
Just want to make sure I get Aliana. Is that right?
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, people always get my name wrong as well. It's beautiful.
Oh,
What's the time difference between us and ye?
I'm just an hour ahead. It's 7 o'clock
An hour.
here.
Noon here.
yeah, it's like 1 here.
So it's still early.
Where are
Yeah.
you based? And Eliana, are you based in Omaha?
Oh no, sorry, we're Washington D.C. here.
Right. Oh yeah. Sorry, Jade. Yeah, you're from Omaha, and well, yeah, must be fairly early over there.
Not too bad. I thought we were starting at 9:30. I think that's what we heard initially, so I was ready for that. But
Yeah.
we sorted it out. It's noon now. All good. Had some breakfast.
Yeah, it was funny. Around in the Telegram group of the working group of Deutsche Wohnen Enteignen, I'm in. The request went around, and I'm actually Irish but living in Berlin. But
Gosh, sorry, we're kind of like just resolving this real quickly. They just went to a different link than the one I'd initially set up. There's a few people here now. There's like 4 people here. We're slowly getting back on track. So I could share that from the official Facebook page now and try to redirect. Okay, do you want to like we get started maybe like 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I apologize profusely for this.
oh yeah, what's the end time supposed to be?
7:30 Irish time.
Okay. Yeah.
It's really weird saying Irish time.
Yeah, I had to double check that Irish time was the same as UK time. I know there's been some problems.
Oh, imagine.
And then my brain was like, is there a Scottish time? Have we had like a proto-independence thing where like did I just not notice? Like
I mean, you're a host, so a little chauvinism is allowed.
yeah, you guys can be awful.
Yeah,
no.
we wouldn't feel right saying UK time and applying it to ourselves, would we?
No, definitely. Well, no reason to. It's strange because I lived in England most of my life, and living in Glasgow makes me feel much more part of like in relationship with Ireland, just because there's loads of Irish people here, and particularly in Glasgow, and so it feels like definitely the most Irish place I've ever lived, but it's not Ireland.
And like the home rule government that you're under.
Yeah, that's that's not so Irish either.
We're getting a few more people are getting collected here now, so we're kind of
you're getting people.
Yeah, we're starting to get the flow now.
Yeah, I visited Glasgow a couple of years ago. Spent almost 2 weeks there staying with an Irish friend there, and it felt a lot like Dublin 20 years before. Look at the one I grew up in.
Yeah, people say that. I think also with people who are being priced out of Dublin, like this is a housing thing actually, people priced out of Dublin moved to Glasgow. I've met quite a few Dubliners or just Irish people who've been in Dublin for a bit and then been like, fuck that,
So I think we can get started now as soon as you're ready. We're in a good enough place to get started.
Right, are we ready? Hello, fellow CATU members. We're coming live to have a discussion with international tenants, unions and groups so that we can understand what's going on across the world and to relate our struggles to each other, because we all do relate. And also to show the solidarity and the strength in what people are actually doing, and to confirm what we're doing is actually exactly the same as what other people are finding difficulties with in housing. So we invited these amazing panelists to come and have a chat about kind of their own struggles through COVID and their plans for after COVID. So instead of me talking and introducing them each and taking up speaking time, we're going to go through each group or person that's representing their group or union, and they can explain a little bit more about themselves, what they do and where they're based. We're going to give them 3 minutes each for that, and we will start with Gloria from Living Rent.
Hey, hi everyone. It's really, really great to be here, and thanks so much to CATU for inviting us to come and talk to you. We're really, really excited at all the organising you're doing over the pond, and we're a tenants union. We're Scotland's tenants union. And we've been going since 2014. We're the only nationwide trade union, tenants union for tenants. And I'm personally a member, and I live in Glasgow, and I also sit on the national committee of Living Rent as the treasurer. So Living Rent are part of Acorn International. We'll probably talk more about that as we go on. And as such, we're a dues paying membership organisation, and we get funding from various organisations. We're currently about 1,600 members, and we're aiming to hit our big 2,000 by the end of March, so in a month's time. And that means we will have doubled our membership in the last 10 months. So that gives you an idea of how we're really exploding as an organisation. Our membership is concentrated in the largest cities, so in Edinburgh and in Glasgow, but we are also increasing our reach in other Scottish cities and also in broader, more rural areas such as Fife, which is really exciting. In terms of how we're organising, we're currently moving from more centralised groups to being in a more decentralised branch structure. So like I know that CATU has committees, and I'm hoping we can talk a bit more about these structures later. And we currently have 6 branches in Edinburgh, 12 in Glasgow and 5 elsewhere. So that's quite a lot of small groups that have actually we formed fairly recently out of much larger groups. That's really exciting. So we've got this increasingly democratic and pluralistic organizing structure. In terms of what we do, we're member-led, so a lot of what we do comes through people approaching us with their problems with housing and their problems with landlords, both in the private sector and the social sector. We negotiate with landlords, we organise in our neighbourhoods, but we also advocate at a local and a national level in terms of local and national government. And we have a strong focus on trying to work across the housing sectors, and we're working increasingly in terms of social and council housing, which I think is a really great move. And anyway, we'll move on to talking about organising in the pandemic, but that's the big overview, and I've had my 3 minutes, so I'm going to stop.
Thanks, Gloria. Fascinating stuff out of Scotland. Absolutely love what's going on over there. You're doing amazing work. Next person to speak would be Jade.
Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Jade. I'm a member of the Omaha Tenants United, Omaha's tenant union. Omaha is smack dab in the middle of the United States. Just for some context, it's in Nebraska. We have been around for about 3 years now. And I think in the last year, our membership has about tripled. And so things have changed quite a lot very recently, kind of due to the pandemic and then also the uprisings for racial justice that have taken place all across this country. Yeah, I'm really appreciative of Katu for inviting us and for having us on. You guys are very much our siblings, I think, because we share the same struggle against landlords, and we're comrades because we've decided to do something about it. Just to talk a little bit about, again, sort of the history, around 3 years ago, we formed out of kind of a mutual aid group who noticed that there are lots of people coming to those, food distribution events that had troubles with their landlords. And so we got together and started doing solidarity network style campaigns against those landlords. And since then, we've transformed our work into not just, that sort of solidarity casework, but to organizing buildings and organizing tenants to build that power for the long haul. So we're involved in those sort of, building those unions at a local level. Then we're also involved in fighting for legislation for tenants to have right to lawyers in eviction court, and just generally supporting tenants when fighting evictions. Yeah, I think that covers a lot of it. I'm sure we'll get to lots of the other examples and lessons we've learned. So thank you.
Thanks a million, Jade. Next up is Eliana from Washington.
Yes, thank you for having us all on this call. I'm super excited. Yeah, so I'm Eliana. I am from Stomp Out Slumlords based in Washington, D.C. And I guess to kind of give our origin story, we kind of started out as like an exclusively like anti-eviction focused project associated with the DSA. We basically went canvassing around to talk to people who were facing eviction, let them know their rights, and like send that, like make sure that they show up to their court hearings and like, have a lawyer, can like fight it in the courts. But I guess like as we were talking to people, we kind of evolved into not just helping people who are facing eviction and like making sure they know their rights, but actually like organizing buildings and tenants on the building level. And that was, I guess, the part of the project that really took off during the pandemic, where it was kind of like we had this like, okay, what are we going to do now that everyone's going to be seemingly evicted right now? So since the pandemic started, I guess we started organizing tenant committees in like 24 buildings across the District of Columbia. Many of these buildings are on rent strike. we've started coordinating like marches on like landlords' homes, like on the mayor's house, on like high-ranking politicians, because like we want to move from doing like organizing just on a building level to like bringing people together into like a citywide tenant organizing committee. So it's like interesting because like I guess the next part is talking about what we're doing during the pandemic, but like the scope and nature of our project has changed, I feel like complete 180 during the pandemic. And like our whole structure has changed. So I'm really excited to see how people's structures and like organizing has responded to the pandemic, because I feel like, you know, yeah, everything is just completely different. And it's really exciting, but also, you know, really scary and a lot of work. And we hope everyone doesn't get evicted.
That's brilliant, Aliana. It's great to hear what's happening and how it's formed. It's interesting to see how everyone's coming out of mutual aid, I suppose, and starting to take direct actions. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about how he's organised through the pandemic, and especially them 24 buildings. Sounds exciting. So I'll move on to the next speaker, and that would be Ian from Berlin.
Hello. So what I'll be doing is introducing the campaign Deutsche Wohnen enteignen, which means, it's in German, means expropriate Deutsche Wohnen, which is a major housing corporation that owns many, many apartments in Berlin. Right, so I hope you can all see my screen. Yeah, so this is the logo. And just to give some context, there is more protection for tenants here than in most English-speaking countries, definitely in Ireland. So the basis is a bit different, but still, rent prices have been rapidly increasing in Berlin over the last few years. At this point, 46% of the total income in Berlin is spent on rent. And Berlin has become one of the most favored cities in the world for investors to park their cash to as in either land or apartments. And this is another thing that's very different than from probably most of where you are, is that the vast majority of residents in Berlin are tenants. And this is a potential power base. So there's some major causes that will be familiar to many of you probably. There's been considerable privatization over the last 30 years. So back before 1990 or so, quite a lot of housing in Berlin, in West Berlin. So was part of West Germany. That was all in public hands anyway. And to pay off city debt, many of these apartments were sold off, many thousands of them, and many were also knocked down. And this caused them to be very attractive for privatization, for investment. And at the same time, there's been a lot of population growth. So so this campaign is not just about one corporation. Deutsche Wohnen is just the biggest. Deutsche Wohnen simply means German residences, but there's also a number of them. So this table lists the largest ones, how many units they own in Berlin, and currently, and what they owned in 2012. And you can see that it's a dramatic increase. And these companies make billions in profits. They are represented on like they're on the stock markets, and they pay considerable dividends for their investors on those markets, and that's the rent that we all pay going to their dividends. And what we're trying to do is arrest this development where these large corporate landlords are gaining a lot bigger shares of the market. So you can see in this graph, there wasn't such a corresponding increase in total apartments in Berlin this time, just they're getting a bigger slice of the pie. There's been a massive decrease in social housing, just skipping through because this is supposed to be a 10-minute presentation. And so it isn't that many small investors. Well, it's actually quite a few, but so yeah, the stock market investors, these ones, and the campaign wants to bring into public ownership the housing stock of these companies which own more than 3,000 apartments, and it would bring them into governance in a legal form that would be subject to the democratic control of the tenants who live in them, because it would be a sort of a public company which is separated into many units on region, like local levels. So it's about reversing privatization, and the German and Berlin constitutions provide a legal basis for this, and it's been reviewed by the city, and it's a totally legally possible to do this. This just explains in detail. And yeah, so what we have to do is collect 175,000 signatures over the next 4 months. The first day of signature collection was yesterday, so there was a big celebratory series of events in many neighborhoods around the city. And then when we get those signatures, we will have a referendum that will coincide with the federal elections this year, and we expect that it'll pass easily, and that Berlin will undo the fatal mistake of privatization of its housing stock, and double its housing stock in public ownership. And I've surely reached 3 minutes by now.
Thanks, Ian. It's amazing to see the similarities between Dublin and Berlin, and how we're kind of developing towards what ye are already fighting. So it's so close to home. John, do you want to say something?
We have another participant joining us, Saki from Cooperation Jackson in the US is going to be just joining the room there now. Just say that before we move on to the next, to Naomi, I guess.
Cool. Should I go now, or should I wait for us to do another introduction? Or...
John?
I guess you can go ahead, Naomi. And if is it Saki, or our newest participant, is happy to introduce themselves in a little bit?
Cool, that's fine. Yeah, thank you for having us, Katu, and it's really interesting to hear from everyone else how we all kind of landed on this issue of housing. I think the journeys have been quite different, but yeah, obviously we're all doing this because in so many cities and so many of our, our communities, housing has just become such a battlefield. So my name's Naomi. I'm organizer with Acorn, so Acorn UK. Yeah, we came, I guess, in terms of origins, we sort of came from a tradition of organising in the United States. So Acorn in the States was massive in the 70s, right up to kind of 2005. And then, yeah, since then, we've kind of got branches across the world, really, like all over. But yeah, in terms of Acorn UK, we started in 2014. So we've been going about 6 years and just absolutely taken off, yeah, we will have this experience, like the way that our communities are going. We've just been at the forefront of kind of fighting mostly on housing issues, but also on other community issues as well. So the way that we kind of operate is we're kind of classic community organizing, where we go into places and we, get contact with the local community, have conversations, find out what issues are affecting those communities, and then build campaigns based on that. So we're not just a tenants union, we're a community union. So potentially, and we have done in lots of cities, like fought on other issues such as, public services, things like fuel poverty, public transport. And yeah, so where I'm based in Brighton in the UK, and most of the stuff that we fight on here is on housing. So yeah, one of the most profitable cities in the UK for landlords, massive shortage of housing, which obviously just creates this really toxic culture around something that, as I'm sure we all agree, should be a human right. And yeah, we fight on these issues with using direct collective action. So that is organising people to come together, to use our strength in numbers, to you know, force letting agents and landlords to do the right thing by their tenants. Yeah, and yeah, in terms of, so we've got like 24 branches across the country, and we're growing all the time. We have been doubling our membership every year since we started 6 years ago, and this, yeah, 2020, obviously a massively challenging year for everybody, but we still managed to double our membership. So really positive about, like, yeah, 2020 we reached 5,000 members and expecting to hit 10,000 in 2021. Yeah, we can kind of, I guess, talk later about how we've sort of organised and dealt with the pandemic, but for now I'll leave it there.
Brilliant, Naomi, thanks a million. We had a newcomer just come in there. It's Saki, is it?
Yeah.
From the co-op. Hi, how are you? Thanks for coming in. So you want to give a little introduction of who you are and the organisation that you represent. I mean, giving everyone 3 minutes for this, just this start.
Oh, okay. I don't think I need to take 3 minutes. My name is Saka Julia. Everybody calls me Saki. I'm with Cooperation Jackson. I'm based here in Jackson, Mississippi, in the United States. We also are a part of a national alliance called Right to the City, and they participate in the Homes for All campaign. We helped to launch a couple of years ago a regional kind of hub of Homes for All called Homes for All South. And so, you know, on, you know, Cooperation Jackson is an emerging vehicle and an institution for community-led development. You know, we are working to build a solidarity economy here in Jackson, Mississippi. And although, you know, crux of our work has to do with developing worker cooperatives and other type of community-based, you know, worker managed democratic businesses, we also have a community land trust. It's the Fannie Lou Hamer Community Land Trust. And because our lives include so many things and we have used an intersectional framework, we are involved in a lot of different areas, food sovereignty, you know, doing urban farming, climate justice, housing, and so with parts of the housing piece, a lot of our work in the last 6 years has focused on developing a community land trust. We, you know, believe that ultimately the solution, although it's really important for tenants to develop power, ultimately the solution is decommodifying housing and having communities collectively steward and manage and have a say over their land and housing, right? And so for the last 6 years, our focus has really been on getting property in our community off of the speculative market and into a community land trust. And it's been within this new kind of like crisis with the health pandemic that we are starting to engage in, like other organizations throughout the South and throughout the United States that we're in alliance with. We're starting to engage in more tenant rights and tenant organizing and housing justice. Thanks. It's cool to be here with you guys and engage in this conversation.
It's really exciting to hear who you are and how you've developed, because like what's coming to my mind sitting here listening to you is about Ireland and how they're selling off our public land and the community land trust, and it's kind of, it might come up in the conversation later on in the second part, but it'd be really interesting to see how you can change people's minds into community land trusts and how to empower them to have their own land and property where it says in the community's trust. So it's really interesting. Do we have any other speakers? Is that everyone? I think we've covered everyone. So that was just an introduction to everybody, who they are, where they're from. It's great to hear how each organisation and how everyone's getting involved collectively in the same struggles and the same fights that we all face as humans. So we move on to the next part, which is really a conversation around what was your experience, I suppose, organising when COVID hit your area, or when the lockdowns or the restriction measures were put in place? What kind of stuff did you have to change around in your structures, and how did you reach out to people, and how did you actually manage to double your membership or to reach people that wouldn't have known who you are, and what tools, etc., that you might have used? Now, we all agreed that we would use the shock face. So because you weren't here, Saki, when we were discussing this, click the shock face if you want to be thrown into the conversation, and that's the way we'll do it. Yeah. So I think first up we have Eliana, straight in there, stomping it in. So if you want to go ahead, Eliana.
Oh, I'm just demonstrating.
Or are you just doing the shock face?
But I can go. Yeah,
you might as well. You gave us an insight earlier on.
Yeah, I guess I went a bit into this in like our intro, because like I just remember at like the beginning of the pandemic, like when like the stay-at-home orders were issued, like back in like March, like we all had like a meeting and we're just kind of like, okay, so I guess we're not going canvassing this weekend. Cool. So what do we do? And we're like, okay, I guess we can make like a resource list or something and give it to people. Like that sounds like a nice thing to do. And we were kind of like in this very like defensive posture. Like we didn't really feel like, you know, people were saying like cancel rent strike, but we're like, wait, how is it a rent strike when no one can pay rent? But we like, you know, we pushed for like an eviction moratorium in DC, like, you know, through the like phone banking and stuff, and like that worked out. But I guess like what really like pushed us to like where we are now, which is like building tenant committees in like individual buildings and like building power across the city, and like, you know, flexing that tenant power in a majority way, was like our friends at a building in Virginia, Southern Towers, a bunch of like laid off union members started like organizing in their own building. And, you know, like they were all like, they were through the Unite Here union, which is like a food service workers union, so that everyone was laid off. And like right from the get-go, they started organizing and said like, yeah, let's do rent strikes. And we were kind of like, oh shit, like, okay, they're doing this now. So like, I guess we better like get off our asses and do something. So we started like a citywide petition to like cancel rent. And from that, we kind of like got like a huge number of signatures, and we kind of like divided that list into like the buildings that were people in. We like called all those people and we were like, hey, why do you want to cancel rent? Like, are you affected by the pandemic? And we really just like, you know, expanded through that, like identifying like people who were like suffering, who were like militant, who were like ready to fight for like actually like the cancel rent goal. And yeah, I guess a big part of it was also like training and organizing our organizers so that like they were ready to organize like, you know, the massive amounts of people we needed to like win something in the city. So yeah, I guess since then, like moving from like an anti-eviction project to mostly like organize on the building level has required us to really like kind of like expand our definition of like leadership and whatnot. And like do like a lot of training. That's like been what our big thing. Doing a lot of training and like giving a lot of people responsibility who haven't had it to like train people so that we can keep rent strikes and like power going.
And
Yeah.
I just Ariana, did you physically do that, or like was everyone hear me?
Did we physically do that? Sorry, cut out a little bit.
Yeah, did you? Sorry, I think my internet connection went down. Did you physically go into the buildings during COVID while the restrictions were on, or did you find organizers out of the buildings that you had to train up and give the responsibility to, or was there much human contact, I suppose, or was it done online and on the phones?
So in the beginning, it was definitely all online and all on the phone. I would say up through July, or like June-ish. Like, I guess like, you know, it was all done online and on the phone in the beginning. And then it was kind of like, okay, like everything is opening up in the United States anyway. Like, and like, we do need to do some stuff in person. So we did start like doing like canvassing, door knocking, like we do like outdoor social distance meetings, like make sure we're masked, or like we'll have protests outside buildings, we'll have marches on landlords and landlord houses like in person. But like honestly, the bulk of our organizing is still online, like through Zoom and like over the phone, which is very different from what we did before, which was almost like all house visits, all in-person stuff.
And does anyone else in any other organization or group relate to this? Have they got a similar experience of how they've been organizing through COVID?
I mean, we were maybe, unlike SOS, I think we were a bit more offensive at the beginning than defensive. I think we were like, hell yeah, we're going to carry on organizing people. And it was like, actually, in a sense, as an organization, I think we were less thrown than I would have expected. And I think that might be because we were already doing quite a lot of stuff online. So, but I think what it's very, very similar to what Eliana was saying in terms of really hitting the phone banking and really hit, which we've done quite a lot of already, and also hitting like the social media and reaching out to people that way. We had a survey quite early on in the pandemic about how the pandemic was affecting renters, and we did that with a workers' rights organization. And that brought in a lot of data, and it brought in people who wanted to be part of what we were doing, how we were organizing. I think in terms of tactics, like I was really nodding when you were saying training people up, because I think one of the things that was amazing is that we really got our member defense on the ground from the beginning. People were not able to pay rent at the beginning of the month, at the end of the month, very, very quickly. I mean, just like in the US, but maybe there was a little bit more leeway in terms of the state. So maybe we weren't quite facing this kind of like mass evictions thing, but we were facing a lot of people being like, hell, I'm in a really bad place. And I think really there's a lot of credit to our organizers. We've got 9 paid staff members, 6 of whom are organizers. And we, you know, they were really identifying leaders, getting people who were joining up quickly, who were winning their cases, who were getting rent reductions or getting rent freezes, then saying, come to this meeting in 3 days' time. We're going to make sure that we all know how to advocate for each other. And I think that model's really worked really well for us. So I would say that I'm really interested to hear about kind of, yeah, how other people's like rapidity or like to this relates to kind of the structures they had before. That they had before COVID. I don't think we should try and see COVID as like a completely unique organizing moment. Like, what did we have in place when we went in?
My sound is gone. Can you hear me? Oh, Gloria just turned off our mic. Sorry. Yeah, it's really interesting to see how we did organise pre-COVID and how we changed our models when COVID came in. But I think in the second part, that's really going to kind of explode because it's the plans of how we move forward after COVID. I think COVID has pushed us and taught us an awful lot about organising online. So it's interesting that training has come up between two organisations already, and organisers, paid organisers are very important in these roles, especially when you're locked in, and it's a lot easier. At least they're getting paid to physically go out and help the members and empower the members. Is there any other group there that would like to talk about? Oh, Jade.
I think Naomi was ready to come in just before.
Was she? Okay, Naomi.
I think Jade was before me, actually. I'm happy to go after.
Okay, all right. Sounds good. Yeah, I think our experience is very similar to that described by Galiana, in that we very much took a defensive stance at first. We put out some petitions and gathered a lot of information from that, and made demands that I think we knew were never going to be met. Perhaps it's different, I think, maybe compared to here, to the rest of the panelists, with the exception of maybe our comrade down in Jackson, is that the state really pretended there was no pandemic. And so we had maybe a month or so of lockdowns. And then we sort of just moved on to, the status quo of people having to go back to work and die. But what that meant was that the crisis in terms of like rents and evictions was very uneven. And so we found it pretty difficult to like take the desperation that put people in the rent strike and sort of keep that going. And so we attempted to form some committees, I think, in a similar fashion, of people who really needed to withhold their rent because they couldn't afford to pay rent. But having that spread across the building was pretty challenging for us. And I think that, the level of like leadership development we were able to do was not up to what was needed. And so we learned quite a lot from those failures very early on.
Thanks very much, Jed. Who wanted to speak next? Was it Naomi?
Yeah, cheers. So in terms of the way that our tactics have changed, so we as much as possible we try and do stuff in person. So it's all about direct collective action. So that's people out on the street, often demonstrations and pickets outside letting agent offices or marching on landlords, things like that. So initially we were quite, obviously a massive challenge when we've got these lockdown restrictions in the UK that came in. And then, after that, them getting changed in quite bewildering ways as well. So really keeping our eye on what the current restrictions were, and kind of changing our tactics according to that. Recruitment is a massive part of that's a massive part of any organisation that wants to grow. So moving recruitment from mostly focused around door knocking to moving that online. So that's creating content and sharing it on social media, and then following up people that sort of respond to that. And then in terms of direct action, so we had different rules that came in at different times in the UK. So at one point you could only meet in groups of 6. So what we did was where before we might have had a big demonstration outside the council or outside a letting agent or whatever, we would think, okay, how do we have the impact of a bigger action, but make it obviously fit it within the law and fit it within what members feel comfortable doing. So we might have groups of up to 6 people, but for the whole day instead of for a couple of hours. So it's keeping that pressure on, but kind of in a different way, just being really relentless with our tactics and with our presence. And then just being really strict around health and safety guidelines. We would still be getting out there as much as possible in person, but just making sure that we had health and safety coordinators. Everybody that could wear a mask was wearing a mask, maintaining social distancing as well, which in the UK was that was a 2-meter distance between everybody that was participating. And just being a bit creative with spacing people out, if we were doing like a demonstration, we might have people like lined up along a wall just so that, you know, we're still there, we're still holding power to account, but we are, you know, doing it in a way that is safe and within the law as well. We also kind of responded to some of the challenges that were unique to the pandemic. So we got a group of ACON members in like 11 cities across the UK to do COVID support work. So that's like delivering food and medicine to people that were vulnerable and shielding. And yeah, also just calling in with local residents that might need a chat and like a check-in. And that quickly became like one of the biggest, in fact, that like the biggest support network that existed in the UK. Much more efficient and much more, yeah, and much quicker off the ground than what the council was offering. And we got like councils and local like pharmacies even like recommending ACORN as a kind of resource to go to for people that were vulnerable and shielding. And yeah, it's interesting, like when I was door knocking before this most recent lockdown, like that was a thing that people really loved in the community, that yeah, we are quite like bolshy, and we do pickets outside letting agents and make a lot of racket, but we also, when the community needs like, you know, food and medicine delivered, then we do step up for that as well. So just sort of responding to what our communities need when they need it.
Yeah, that's amazing, Naomi. Ian and Saki. So Ian just after putting up his shocked face first. So we'll go to Ian and see how Berlin have been organising.
Yeah, so I suppose we were in a fortunate position that as I said in my presentation, that our process was so we're using a law to make it possible to have a referendum, and the referendum will be based a buyback of the privatized housing stock. Oh, and by the way, it'll be well below market value. Anyway, so what we had to do was gather 20,000 signatures, valid signatures. That means the person has to have German citizenship. But we succeeded in gathering 77,000, showing it's very popular, and that was in 2019. So we're lucky in that we got that big hurdle out of the way in spring and summer 2019. And we continued the Berlin city government then takes these, once it has 20,000 signatures, it takes these proposals into a type of legal consideration where they have a look and see if they either want to implement it right away or see if it's just possible. And that took about a year. So that was most of 2020. So that relieved us of a bit of pressure to immediately act and gather signatures during the worst of COVID lockdowns. But we did continue working. So back in 2019, so the whole initiative started at the end of 2018, but back in 2019, the people in it, well, because I can't claim to have been involved back then, I only got involved towards the end of 2020. But anyway, the members of the campaign, they essentially started a community organizing school within the campaign, and it's called it's a working group called Starthilfe, so it's starting help, and that they produced like a 60-page book, which is available on German on our website, about how to go door to door with your neighbors, which is not so traditional in Germany, have these conversations and bring them to like what to talk about, 70% listening, 30% talking, like what I think would be known as deep canvassing in the US. And yeah, how to do a meeting. So we were doing this back in 2019, and so the number of local groups were just gradually growing up, and then when COVID hit it, I think it threw us quite a bit, because we hadn't been doing that much online, but so we started having our meetings online, and by then, and that's I think did bring some people in who maybe wouldn't have thought they'd have time to come to a physical meeting. So it did bring some people in, just being able to switch it on the computer. and then the initial lockdown was pretty much over by mid-May, and then we were able to do socially, physically distanced actions, to take part in protests with our banners to keep the visibility high, and to continue this door knocking work. So a small group that existed already would particularly focus on mapping out a building that was owned by Deutsche Wohnen or another such corporation, and do a knockathon, or a blitz as you call it in German, to have all these conversations in one day, and that would be a way to get a lot more people. So the fact that summer, like in contrast to Ireland, throughout the summer, besides the large events being forbidden, there wasn't that many restrictions, and and then this led to the Germany getting pretty badly hit by the second wave, and we've been in lockdown since November, but by now we're much better at these online meetings.
Solidarity.
And we've had a big participation in the online meetings, and we're lucky to have built up this structure before, and now these restrictions are going to be eased soon, so it'll be easier to be out in public collecting signatures again.
Yeah, and it's been amazing to watch Berlin before, with the amount of grassroots protests that they can pull off, the amount of people that they can get out onto the streets. And I think it was last year I was in Berlin with the European Action Coalition, and we got some training from you guys as well around tenants door knocking and meetings and stuff. So
yeah, this is building up on years of protests, increasing organizations,
and it's going to be really powerful. I believe we were meant to do a solidarity action, which is last year, but was called off because of COVID. 28th of March, we were all across Europe. We were meant to do a solidarity action phrase.
Yeah, and we're gonna do it this year on the 27th. It'll happen in many cities, in Dublin too, I think.
Yeah, well, we could talk about that at the end, so where we can all show our solidarity and actions that are coming up. Saki, would you like to pop on there and just have a quick chat? Because I have a few questions I want to throw in at you once Saki has done her bit. Speaker, you're on mute. Saki's still on the mute.
Somehow unmuting isn't working out so well. I don't know.
Can everyone unmute and come back on and see if it's Saki's?
Yeah, I think Saki's having problems with it. Yeah, it looks like she's not able to
unmute.
Maybe suggest Saki going out of the room and coming back in again. Sometimes that works.
Yeah, turn it off and turn it on again.
Is she gone? John?
Yeah, it looks like Saki's either frozen or disconnected. If she can come back in and come back out, it'd be great to.
We've got a technical problem.
At least not one on my end this time.
Okay, we'll continue in anyway, because I have a few questions here. That will relate to Saki as well, though.
Gloria mentioned just kind of a bit about like the concessions of the state, and that was something I think came up in a few of our points. So maybe we could just talk about that for a second.
Yeah, okay.
I just wanted to jump on that because, yeah, I think it's a really, really fundamental difference between what's happening in Berlin, what's happening in the United States, what's happening in, I think in Ireland to some extent. I know that you're organising in both Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, but I think the what we have in Scotland specifically, so for our American comrades, we have a devolved government in Scotland. So there are certain things that the Scottish government has control over in relationship to the UK government. So housing is one of them. And that has just given us more leverage from the get-go, because one of the ways the Scottish government likes to talk about itself is different from the UK government in Westminster. And so sometimes we can use that to our advantage and say, well, hey, do you want to be different? Maybe you can freeze the rents, and that, that hasn't, we haven't got a comprehensive rent freeze, but we did very quickly get an eviction freeze, and that was extended. So that's running out at the end of March. So interesting conversations to be had in the next month. But it was they were far more amenable to those approaches and that lobbying than I think the UK government was in the context of Acorn in England. And I think that also we have different relationships with local government again, and obviously like you guys in the US, you're all in different cities. Berlin has this very particular this mechanism for referenda, which Ian's group are using. And I think that something we're really working on with, we can talk about this more at the end, but it's something we've started building up already in the pandemic, is how we're going to interact with the Scottish government elections in May. And we have a manifesto, which is very broad. I can talk about that in a bit. But like we are actively working on using politicians in the way that, in all the ways that we can, even though we also want to encompass more radical politics in our conversations. We're a grassroots democratic organisation. So yeah, things like that. So that, yeah.
I'm just going to jump onto one of these questions because I think this can relate to exactly what you guys are talking about. Anyway, so the question from YouTube from Brennan, he said he's interested to hear how any groups who organise rent strikes evaluated the risk of eviction when work is even more precarious in lockdown. Now, obviously, that would be after our concessions or whatever the hell they've given us, because we're going to have a flood of eviction notices coming in. They've already started coming in, they're just on hold till it's lifted up. And we're going to have this massive flood of evictions. So anyone that has organised a rent strike, how did they evaluate the risk of eviction when work is even more precarious in lockdown? Does anyone want to answer that? Eliana?
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like, for us, it was almost like, it felt almost like it wasn't a question for us, because I feel like the majority of people in buildings couldn't pay their rent. So I guess like the rent strike was really getting people to like, if they're getting some amount of income, prioritizing like eating over paying rent, or like get it, like in some buildings, like it was convincing like wealthier residents to like go on solidarity rent strike with the people who can't pay. But like also like, like we try and like organize, like the rent strike organizing was in a lot of ways like a gradual process for us, I think, too, in the sense that like it's not like everyone decided in like one moment like we're going on rent strike. It was like kind of some people who couldn't pay rent got together and then like slowly organized people to get onto it. And right now in some buildings we're trying to expand the rent strike to like other buildings owned by like the same landlord or property manager. So yeah, like I guess we are protected by the eviction moratorium right now. So we're kind of that will expire soon, but like it's very much like has informed our strategy in the sense that like, because people can't be evicted right now, it's the time to get leverage. And we actually have won concessions from certain landlords, but we're keeping the pressure on in like other buildings.
Super stuff. We'll have to keep an eye on you guys. definitely to get our own tactics right. Does anyone else have on that evictions, or I'll move on to the next question because this might suit
yeah,
someone else.
I could say something.
Yeah, work away. Yeah.
It's a question really. So I think here in Germany, like in many other countries in Europe, but I think not America, you had this arrangement where the state would pay employers to keep people employed. So it would there's not really much of an rent strike. Isn't really. It was talked about a bit at the start, but then I think it became clear to everyone on the broader left that you'd never get sufficient momentum for that. And also in Germany, we have this system where if you like miss rent payments, and especially if you declare you're going on this rent strike, then it negatively affects your credit score, and that lasts, and that like stays on for many years. So I think that's another consideration that weighs big on people's minds. Like, and so yeah, you wouldn't get it would be very hard to get a critical mass of people to do this, and the credit score thing. And I wonder, are those issues in other countries? And also, let's not forget, Saki wanted to say something.
Thanks, Ian.
I think I wasn't going to say a whole lot more. I think like there's a similar thread throughout what folks are saying in terms of like how we responded once the pandemic and like lockdown started. I think that we had to pause for a minute and figure out like how to pivot. We were advocating for rent strikes from the beginning. I mean, one of the things that took hold in the US and that we did here in Jackson was that we did demonstrations using cars. So like, it was just like a march, but folks being inside their cars and drawing on their cars, writing messages on their cars, having posters, like flags and all kinds of things. Similar to what people were saying, just having to think about just like online. And actually what I was thinking about when my computer decided not to let me control anything was, it's a real challenge. The digital divide is, was a big challenge in terms of thinking about how you get people to still come to meetings, but to do that through, something like Zoom. And so access being a real challenge. I think that like towards the end of the summer, we shifted because we own a shopping plaza and there's a space that was a grocery store that's vacant right now. We had like really big indoor space where we could have people be physically distanced, have folks have masks, have food that, only one person could kind of like hand out, and still, so we started in August and had a couple, but then slowed down on that again, People's Assembly, where folks really wanted to focus in on police terror and also on housing. And that led to us having an assembly committee on housing, and being able to bring in some new people to think about just kind of like really, really short-term, immediate, what do we need to do? Thinking about just like how there's no housing rights in Mississippi and in the South to begin with. And then like even midterm and long-term, like people wanting to start organizing to develop tenant unions, but like, what is it that we could do in the immediate term? And so, while we're still, I think a group of folks are still developing the kind of like training and the muscle to be able to do eviction defense, we created a hotline. And so we have a hotline that's running here in Jackson. So yeah, that was it. Oh, and then we also were just kind of trying to figure out, like, we're like around, like solidarity economy and cooperation and, you know, like mutual aid. And it was kind of like, you know, this is like the moment to do that. And then we actually had to fall back a little bit because folks who we were in communication with in Italy, who had been dealing with this, you know, way before we were, like, folks ended up getting sick. And so it was like, do we have the capacity to do mutual aid in a way that protects other people and protects ourselves? And so how we kind of contributed in that moment outside of like the work that we already do is that we started making masks. Both we had folks sewing masks, and we had our emerging fab lab, our fabrication laboratory, 3D printing some masks. That was a major shift.
That's brilliant, Saki. So I'm going to change a bit of the structure that we talked about. We said we were going to just have this conversation, but we're running out on time, and I really want to get this question in, right? So I'm going to read out this question, and then each of you have a minute to answer it, all right? And it comes in from Niche, Katu member, and she says, watching Katu develop over the last year, one thing that's been positive for me is how it successfully challenged the idea that there's a linear choice between fully democratic organising or proper structure, discipline, etc. For the more established organisations, is that difficult to sustain, and how is it managed? Did you catch that, or do you want me to read it again?
Yeah, so a linear choice, what is that?
I would presume that linear choice is like equal, like it's democratic structure. Everyone's got it. There's no hierarchy, but when
Like
you
a
put in
binary
a
choice.
structure and discipline, hierarchy develops through that. So I think that's what the question is really talking about. The more established organizations, I'm pretty sure, have come up against this. So if you have, how is it managed and sustained? Anyone? Do we understand the question?
Yeah, I think she's just talking about just like hierarchy within organizations, right? And just kind of like,
that's what I'm getting out of that. That it's how do you like organize within your structure, your organization structure,
and how
linear or hierarchy. And if you become caught up in hierarchy and the structure, how do you deal with that? How is it managed? How is it sustained that it's still democratic and equal? Jade?
I think Gloria wanted to start, so.
Naomi could probably also speak to this because we're using the same organizing model, and I think Katu's is also similar, but the aim is to have as decentralized a model as possible whilst still all having similar like aims and tactics. So that is so the Acorn model is a sort of hybrid model. It's not an anarchist organizing model, and it's not neither is it a top-down organizing model that you would have in more like traditional trade unions in this country, for example. And actually something sorry, I've got like 30 seconds, but basically in Living Rent at the moment, we're moving from a more centralized structure to having branches, and the branches have more autonomy over what they want to do. So in practice, that's a geographic organizing practice, and it has implications for how we organize at a local and a national level. And there is a bit about that on our website. But yeah, I'll hear from other people. I don't think it's a binary choice, though. I think it's a balance, and it's really sometimes quite hard.
Just looking at Nietzsche explaining themselves in the comments, and it's like this idea that it's not. I think it's exactly what you touched on, Gloria. It doesn't have to be an either or between, okay, we're this kind of Occupy style, fluid, horizontalist movement that has like no leaders or like that, but you also don't have to be the hyper structured, kind of problematic, extremely like like party structure or like overly militant in order that it like pushes people away, and that there is like a fluidity to this that certain organizations can encounter and traverse without picking an either or. Naomi?
Yeah, sorry, I'll just come in on that because I guess, yeah, as Gloria said, we kind of share an organising model. So we, again, yeah, it's the balance, isn't it? Like, I guess no system is going to be perfect, but I guess the idea behind how Acorn organises is that you have branches with a lot of autonomy in the sense that, you know, each individual community, each individual city has its own issues that community needs to campaign on. But the, you know, the strength in having a national organisation with certain structures in place and certain, like, you know, structures of accountability as well, and shared tactics across the branches, and a kind of, yeah, like a set kind of training model for organisers as well, means that you can, you know, you're unified in certain practices that have stood the test of time. Like the tradition that we come from has been around for decades, and we, you know, we've taken a lot from historic, you know, organizations that have done really great things, and it kind of works. Like, yeah, Acorn's made massive gains, and Living Rent as well, and having, obviously, like, there are always cases where the balance can be a bit wrong, but having that autonomy for local groups to do what they want, whilst at the same time having a national direction and a national strategy, allows you to kind of be, you know, to pull together on national campaigns. So if you've got like a campaign against like the government in Westminster, then it's really useful to have a unified strategy of dealing with that across different branches as well. So yeah, we're both a local and a national organisation, and that's sort of what we do.
Super. Jade, I think you are next, right?
Yeah, sure. I think our, you know, political context is pretty different, so I can't, you know, speak specifically in the same way I think that, you know, the previous speakers did. But within our, you know, formation, we have, you know, leadership. That leadership is not like a hierarchical leadership; it's a leadership of responsibility. And so, you know, I think the contrasting between, you know, discipline and then being fully democratic is sort of missing the point, right? Which is that discipline comes from being accountable to each other and being accountable to the work. And like, you don't build that through electing it, right? You build it through relationships.
Eliana?
Yeah, I wanted to like yeah, I think what Jade was saying, like our context is very different, but I feel like we've kind of arise out of a like similar kind of structure, in that we were like very decentralized, like just kind of like a group of people like organizing together. But like as we grew and to respond to this situation, we needed to develop like, I guess, like a accountability and responsibility structure within our organizing, in that like we have a committee of experienced organizers leading less experienced organizers and like checking in with them so they can like learn and be trained, because like our organizing is concentrated in like building power at like the building and like tenant level. And like, you know, like our goal is to like kind of like move people up through that structure, so that like, you know, like a tenant who organized their building will eventually feel confident organizing tenants in other buildings, and then leading organizers of organizers. Like, you know, it's kind of this structure where it's like people have like emerging responsibility, and like, you know, support, because we don't do anything without support and accountability to each other. At least I don't do anything. I'll just sit on my butt all day if no one tells me to do anything.
Yeah, it's really interesting, the idea of care and supporting people up through the structure. So I think we'd all agree on that's the way we'd like to organise and empower people to continue on what we'd be trying to spread the word about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw out another question because we really are running out of time. And this is the last question. Give us all the minute each. And then to finish up, I'll give us all the 3 minutes again to talk about what your plans are for the next year, I suppose, post-COVID. So the next question is, any of the groups deal with significant digital divide, hampering or affecting shift to online organising? So any of the groups deal with a significant digital divide, hampering or affecting shift to online organising. Does that make sense to everyone? Does anyone have any experience with that in their organisation? Naomi?
Yeah, so that's like been obviously, like, I think it's affected all of our organising, but been a massive opportunity in the sense that we've also got members coming and getting involved that weren't able to access like meetings and actions before, because they might, you know, have access needs that are met by using Zoom. At the same time, like obviously, especially older people, like it's really hard to get them involved in certain things because of Zoom. We developed like a guide for getting like, you know, older people and people that struggle with technology to use Zoom, and also, yeah, to kind of encourage people to kind of interact with phone calls as well, where it used to be maybe more comfortable for them to do door-to-door stuff. So I guess it's just putting the time into like developing those resources and training people up to have those conversations with people that find it tricky, and really, yeah, putting in that time and effort to making sure that you can get people on board as much as possible.
Cool. Anyone else? Saki, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I had mentioned that earlier because a lot of folks in poor and working class, like Black neighborhoods, and you know, across kind of just like communities, don't have computers, and I think that it's a challenge to use the phone. Folks have, I mean, I feel like internet access is very available, and then at the same time, like working internet access isn't that great, and it also is limited depending on like what kind of carrier you can have, right? And so like a lot of folks don't have cell phone plans where they can just be on the internet all the time. And so you know, when I was talking earlier, I was and about digital divide, that's what I was talking about, like both people having computers and even when folks have cell phones, not necessarily having internet access. And so, yeah, that's even though, you know, the United States is seen as this like big rich country, that is actually an issue in poor and working class communities here.
Yeah, and I can certainly relate that with us. We've had to do an awful lot of homeschooling with the kids, and like that technology and learning everything around just the school, and never mind organising and can't get my head around Zoom and all that. It's an awful task for older people to take on, or people that are from disadvantaged areas, where it's either buy into the digital divide in the next few years. My internet, can everyone hear me? I'm now unstable.
Eliana and then Gloria and Ian as well. We're getting tight in time. Like it's like really relevant. Like I was thinking about this digital divide following on what Eliana said about like relationship building and care and moving people up through structures, and like how do we actually do that when we're facing that divide? And it really ties what Saki said as well, because we don't want to just be doing the same groups of people. We kind of reach out to people that are like don't have the same access, but we're forced to use these tools. Or how do we get around that?
Yeah, I guess like I mean, this does relate back to the structure we were talking about. Like, I mean, like we've definitely encountered that problem with like a lot of people not knowing how to use Zoom, not having like access to the internet, their internet cutting out. And like, I feel like that's where our structure becomes really important, is because then like, you know, if we have like a younger person or somebody who's like able to use the internet, like they teach like our older like members like how to use Zoom, or like we'll use some other like conference calling app, or just like, you know, if they just like can't get on the internet at all, like they'll get on the phone with some of like the committee members. Yeah, and then it just like, you know, by distributing responsibility amongst people and then like moving people up, I feel like we tend to not have that much of an issue with the digital divide, because like we tried to build up enough leaders who can do digital, and that it's not really an issue of communication as long as you can communicate it through the structure.
Grand. Just noticing the time there, do you mind if we go over a few minutes, because we were a little bit late starting? Is it okay? Because then that means I can give you all your 3 minutes each for the end, and because we're really interested in hearing from all of you exactly what you plan post COVID, and how can we show solidarity to each other when you are doing such actions, or how can we stay internationally linked together. Yeah. So I suppose I'll start with Gloria. You're first on my screen there.
Okay, so this is the future, right? You're asking me about the future.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, we're super ambitious. Like we are not letting the pandemic get in the way of our organizing. We want, in fact, it's obviously more important than ever, that's a big cliche, to organize collectively. And in terms of what we're looking forward to, we've got about 6 things. So we're looking forward to kind of basically our vision for that everyone in Scotland has decent affordable housing, as is their human right. And we're doing that partly by changing the narrative of what housing is for. Like we want it to be about making a life rather than making a profit. One of the ways that we're doing that is through campaigning for the Scottish Government and the local government in Scotland to implement our manifesto, which we've got for the Scottish Parliament elections, which, as I said, are in May. And that is a 5-point manifesto, which we've already started working on, both in our local groups and also at more national level. So that is focusing particularly on fighting buy-to-let landlordism. We want restorative justice for vacant land, maximising public housing. We want to fix the accountability gap in former public housing, what's known as stock transfer in Scotland. We want to introduce rent controls, something we've been working on for years, but 2021 we want to be getting them, and we're going to put a lot of pressure on the government for that, whoever is making up the Scottish Government come May. And we actually want rent reductions as well. So we're working on that. We're working on like a kind of ambitious political platform. And one of the ways in which that's already developing, and I think it's going to be exciting taking it into the next few years, is a local campaign we've got going in Glasgow at the moment in one of our local groups called Hands Off the Valley. And basically, like it's a site of former public housing that has all been completely demolished and razed, and the group has come together to campaign for fully public democratic housing to be on that site. This is quite a new thing for Living Rent. So really our bread and butter has been like individual tenant structures, lobbying and advocacy, but actually a group of those people have built a hut on that land and they're continuously occupying it and basically forcing the council to come to them. So that's a really great example of lots of things. I think we want to get on our front foot on public housing and imitate some of the things that are happening in Germany, some of the things that Jackson have been working on for years, coming at it from a different way, but ending up there. In terms of opportunities, I think the fact that we have been organising and building membership and creating really strong relationships, there's been a bit of chat about how difficult that is, and I think it's true. There's been but there have been some good relationships formed in our organisation, and I think we're going to hit the ground running once there is fewer restrictions. At the moment in Scotland, we're very much in lockdown, but I think that we've built something which is going to be really strong. So we're looking forward to getting out there and door knocking and meeting each other, in real life. I think it's going to be really beautiful. My personal ambition for 2021 is that we can have a really nice picnic. So that's really what I want to see. I want to share some food with people in the park, which is modest, but I think it's a really important part of organising. So thanks.
Brilliant, Gloria. Naomi, you're next on my screen, so do you want to go ahead?
Oh yeah, so like really hopeful about 2021 and 22. So like, yeah, obviously like the biggest crisis that's affected our country and memory, for me at least. And like, it's, yeah, the fact that we've, all of these challenges that we've managed to come out fighting nonetheless, and we've still managed to like double our membership since last year has been just incredible. In a context where other organisations like charities have just like either folded or lost massive amounts of funding from donations, it seems like people really realise that the government isn't looking out for our interests. Like, we need to get together as communities and stand up for ourselves. And I don't see that momentum slowing down anytime soon. And it's a really exciting time to be in organising, I think. And yeah, with Acorn specifically, like we've got cities across the UK and towns that want to set up Acorn branches, so put in loads of resources into setting those up and looking at the specific challenges that face different kinds of towns, different kinds of communities. And in London as well, we just opened in London in November, which is something that obviously loads of that's just going to make the organisation explode in a way that it hasn't before. Lots already, like 300 members, 3 branches, so just looking at expanding in the capital, which is really exciting. And just sort of like taking the lessons of the pandemic and the different tactics that we've kind of perfected over that time. So gotten really good at online actions, and trying to bring that into our organising a bit more, because that's been really effective. Also, you taking the opportunity during this crisis to kind of build branches, like train up more members than we had trained up before. So just really excited about when we can go out and do organising, like what we were built to do. So door knocking, meeting people in person, doing direct in-person actions, all of the preparation and training that we put into building our branches before now, we can actually use it in 2021 and 22. So really positive about that. I'm really excited to see what those years bring. In terms of ways that people can show solidarity, like Acorn is hyper, I guess, local to the kind of branches that wherever people come from in the States, I guess. I don't know if you have Acorn branches near you, possibly, I'm not sure. But I guess getting involved in what you guys are doing and just sticking with it, and keep on doing what you're doing and join any and every union that you can.
Thanks, Naomi. Next I've got Jade.
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest change, there's 2 huge changes that are going to kind of affect what we're doing going forward. I mean, the first is that people learn that austerity is not the only way that we can live, right? Like, there was, spending that we didn't think was ever going to be possible from the state in the last year, and so that has to continue to go forward, right? Because the crisis is not over, and we have to continue to build the power to make sure that the working class is not the one that pays for all of this, right? In our state, they announced, from this sort of slush fund of money, that 200 million will be going to landlords directly to sort of bail them out for lost rents. And yet there's no money for protections against evictions. There's no money for finding housing for people. There's just money for the landlords. And so the only way we can change that is to organize and to build the power to make those demands. And I think the optimistic part of that, right, though, is that we have a whole lot of people who cut their teeth, whether that be fighting the police last summer or organizing their neighbors to go bigger and to organize even further. At sort of a national level, in the last year, we kind of coalesced the sort of autonomous tenants union tendency within the United States into the Autonomous Tenants Union Network, which I think, we've got 25 or so individual cities and their tenants unions that have joined. And we have to see that keep growing, because the demands for housing right aren't just local, they're national. And I think as we start to build our power nationally, we can start to demand things like reinvestment in public housing, and social housing. Yeah, there's a million more things that we have to do, right? But we have to start where we are.
And best of luck, because we're all fighting for the same thing across the world in the end, at the end of the day. Just different times, different issues, different effects. Eliana, would you like to just give your 3 minutes on exactly what Stomp Out some Lords are going to do in the next year?
Yeah, so I guess I mean, personally, I'm really excited for, I guess, like, all the leaders who have become like strong organizers in their own buildings to kind of like move up and start organizing like other buildings and organizing other organizers. That's like the most exciting part for me, because like people who had like, to see like people who didn't have like the confidence to say like, oh, to like talk to their neighbors and like move them to action to feel confident in doing that, and also like organizing other people, is incredible. And I think that's going to be like our big focus for the next year. I guess like some other things that I'm excited for. I'm excited for people to bring the organizing skills they've learned into their workplaces. We've already like gotten reports from like some of our tenant leaders being like, yeah, I got my coworkers together to march on our manager the other day. And a bunch of us are also part of this like, project to like kind of like infiltrate and organize like key workplaces, and we're hoping to bring some of our tenant leaders into that. I guess we're also have a bunch of more like fun projects too. Like we're hoping to get like a nice like sports thing going. Like I want to do kickball, but I feel like there's more interest in doing soccer, which is fine. We're hoping to get like a kids group off the ground. Like we seem to have like already like a little like kids drum corps at our protests like often. So maybe some more musical stuff. So yeah, I'm just like really excited to keep like building up this like structure of relationships, and like have people really want to take like their leadership from the building to like building a movement in the entire city.
Amazing, Eliana. And the offer's there for our Irish membership to come over and maybe teach the kids to do a bit of hurling, Gaelic or Irish dancing.
Oh my God, I would love that.
I'm pretty sure we could find a few representatives to go over to Washington, no problem. Ian, would you like to give a little rundown on what you guys plan for the next year after your campaign, I assume?
Yeah, speaking of concerts, so our campaign for the next year, it's just we're for the next 4 months, we're focused on getting these signatures. We have developed a health concept to prevent spreading COVID, basically. And with like, it's basically people are meeting up in collection teams, but there's luckily in the law there's a specific exception from lockdown restrictions for people meeting for political activism, this or to fulfill referendum requirements, like for collecting signatures. So speaking of concerts, we had a small rally today in my local neighborhood, actually, as it happened to mayor the neighborhoods, to mark the start of the collection, the 4 months collection time, and there was some funny people, funny rappers with very funny lyrics specifically for this topic that they've written. But you were asking about after the campaign. So the signature collection, presuming it'll be enough signatures, then the vote will happen on the same day as the federal election, 26th of September. And then after that, will be campaigning to make sure that the law is implemented as we want it to be, and it isn't watered down. But yeah, we're very much focused on the next few months. And aside from Deutsche Wohnen enteignen, I'm also involved in a new campaign which is attached to the European Action Coalition on Housing, called Rentvolution, and it's mainly aimed at getting activists in who are in like non-housing movements or are not attached. And yeah, we're getting set up now, and we're orienting our demands, which are still formulating, at towards the or like around the Green New Deal for Europe, which is a document that exists, and we want to have things like getting European central bank funds for allowing cities to deprivatize, so renationalize or take it public ownership their housing that has been privatized, because many cities in Europe have been subjected to far harsher austerity than any city in Germany, and they austerity needs to end in Europe to let deprivatization happen. So we're working on that, and anyone's welcome to get involved. We have a website, rentvolution.eu. Yeah, so there's lots to keep us busy. Like we need people for research, social media content, all that, the usual stuff. So yeah, next 4 months, get the signatures, laser focused on that, keep organizing tenants, and in order to get signatures and get people campaigning for the longer term. Another thing we want to do is use the data about how many people whose signatures weren't counted as valid because they were from another country, to get the data and scandalize that a bit, to scandalize the disenfranchisement of people who don't have German citizenship, like me, who no matter how long we've lived here. So that's also on the agenda. Yeah, but I'm pretty sure we're going to win this, and yeah, I look forward to having a lot more conversations with people about it and helping people in other countries. I mean, we are a bit different from most of you guys because we're not a tenants union. We support tenants unions, and we have the support of the existing ones because they've existed in Berlin for a long time. But it's a bit different. But so it's like we're much more laser focused on an immediate goal. Yeah.
Yep, amazing, yeah. And best of luck with it all. Saki, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm good. My cursor's working. You know, I think that we still have a long way to go here in the US around the pandemic. You know, I mean, yeah, I think there's still a long way to go. And so there's a lot of fighting that's gonna have to happen to keep people housed. And so, you know, locally, we're involved in within a coalition to push for a municipal level moratoriums throughout the state of Mississippi. It's a lot easier in the bigger cities, and Jackson is the capital, where you can actually, like, the mayor can decide that, and it doesn't have to be the full kind of council or board. And you know, but like the moratoriums aren't even enough, right? Because just like what happens once that ends, you know, there's a real concern around landlords hitting folks with like impossible bills that ends up ultimately meaning, you know, it's just like you won't get evicted in February, but come June, it's kind of inevitable if you have such a big bill, right? So, you know, we're needing to kind of like drum a beat and raise support for debt forgiveness and continuing to like say like rent needs to be canceled and utilities need to like stay on and not be cut off. So now that we have the hotline up and running, we're moving towards having, trying to have consistent Know Your Rights workshops And those would be both online and like limited and in person. Because we're also a part of kind of like that regional work that I was telling you about in the South, because the South is so hard when it comes to any kind of protections and rights, especially work and housing. We're participating in a Rooted and Ready like pilot, and developing Southern specific strategies for eviction defense, and also going through a series of renter organizing. How do you organize, organizing one-on-one? How do you organize renters? I think that this moment provides an opportunity again, because the contradictions are so heightened. It really provides an opportunity for raising the consciousness around folks who are, who have been struggling, but like, I think the struggle and how little the state and how, the nature of capitalism works, is going to care whether you like literally live or die. It's always, it's warm. We're in the South, and last week we had freezing temperature and freezing rain. People, like water froze in their pipes. People didn't have access to so many things. And like, if you were in the street, you literally would like die. And so being able to, raise the consciousness around folks in the immediate time where they are suffering like the most, I think actually provides an opportunity for us to have people start questioning capitalism, and really talk about and think about like, well, why is it set up in this way? Like, why is housing set up in this way anyway? And what is it that we need? And what is it that we want in the future, to be like a totally different system where no one has to worry about being housed? So I think that like there's an opportunity to be able to bring people in a different way that there wasn't like a year or two ago. And that's going to allow for being able to build more numbers and build more power in communities for folks to be able to, and I think that if folks can see the value in collectively pooling support together in this way, that will also trickle into and create opportunities where people are thinking about that in terms of like our politics and our political system. Thanks. Oh, and so last thing, I think that like having things like this, I'm thankful that I heard about it from like, I consider Seamus a comrade who I was in Germany with a couple of years ago, and it was housing activists and organizers in Europe and in the United States that came together and come together every year, or had come together every year. And so, I think that like being able to have this kind of platform, being able to have this kind of space where we talk to each other, where we learn from each other, where we even maybe share, where we share challenges and how we're overcoming them, or like, even though our contexts are very different within Europe and the different countries and then across the world, it's still really important for us to be able to do this. And so I think that if this can be something that's regular, then that's dope. And then when there are opportunities for solidarity and support, we're at least engaged in building relationships so that we know how to do that for each other. Thanks.
Thanks, Eki. And yeah, I just have to say the same. It has been absolutely amazing talking to everyone from each organisation. Each of us having their say. We could go on all night and discuss so much and chat so much more. But we do have to end it. And I do hope that we will stay in contact. I'm sure we can set up like an email to admin with everyone on it, so that we can stay in communication with each other. And definitely support each other's actions, learn from each other, maybe do each other's trainings, and continue to have solidarity right across the world. Yeah, because at the end of the day, all we want is public homes. Yeah.
Yeah, I so look forward to that, and yeah, to keep the activities, keep momentum going, and making housing a human right everywhere.
Yeah, down with landlords, up with us. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks
Well done.
thanks for hosting this, Katu.
It's been a pleasure to have you all here, and it's been incredible to chat to some really great comrades. Like, and I can't wait to see where these discussions keep going in the future. That we all stay touched and linked in together. Cool.
Bye.
Bye now.